thanks for being here. This
Yeah,
is so
thanks
cool.
for coming, Dennis Furton. I'd like to say the name so we can make it clear to everyone who's listening who it is.
Well, David Tooney and Elise McGann, it's good to be here.
I wanted to start off with asking you we thought we'd have you on because a lot of the students know your name, know who you are, you're superintendent, but the students especially don't really know what it is to be like the superintendent. We don't know what kind of day-to-day jobs you have, and I'm curious to what those are.
Oh, wow. It's where I reveal what I actually do.
Yeah, I'm very
This is
curious about
this
that.
is the spot.
So, it's a different job than being a principal, which is what I was before, which is more of a scheduled day. If you're the principal, and Mr. Gilchrist could come in and tell you all about that, but your day is really structured by the beginning and end of the school day, what happens in between, supporting the teachers and the students very directly. And as the superintendent, I have 5 buildings to look after, and I've got 5 operational departments to look after. And my day can be a lot of meetings in my office and then at the ISD or in other school districts. I spend a fair amount of time meeting with my principals, with my central office administrators such as Mr. Ely or Ms. Boovy. Spend a lot of time on budget, a lot of time on policy, the rules that govern the district. I've got a 7-member board who I work for, and that means I have 7 bosses who I have to make sure I'm communicating with. It's a job that is never boring for me because no 2 days are ever the same. I can sometimes start my workday at 6 o'clock in the morning and finish at 9 o'clock at night, and other days I come at 8 and I can roll out at 4. So I have a great amount of variety in my day.
And you said there are 5 operational you're controlling. So just for people who might not know, and I don't even think I know all 5 actually, but
Quiz.
so the 5 would be
Food service, transportation, custodial maintenance, and fitness and aquatic center. So custodial and maintenance are separate, so those are our 5.
Where were you a principal before? What school?
I was a principal, first assistant principal in Galveston, Texas, at a large high school, 2,500 kid high school in Galveston called Ball High. And then I was principal in Onekama, which is as far away from Ball High as you can get because it's, that was probably 400 students we had. And then I was principal in Glen Lake, which is in the Leelanau Peninsula by Traverse City. So, yeah.
Did you grow up in Texas, or
No.
what took you down there?
Grew up in Ionia, Michigan, went to Michigan State, and wanted to get away from home when I graduated from college. So first job offer I had was from Ball High to teach high school English. Taught 10th grade English there for 4 years. And it was one of those things that, I went down there not knowing what was going to happen for a job interview, and the principal was a graduate of Eastern Michigan University. He'd been living down there for a while, and he had a Texas twang already, which, is that southern voice and everything like that. He was a great guy. Offered me the job, and stayed there for 6 years teaching and then as an assistant principal.
Oh, that's cool.
It was fun.
That's a long line of history to go over. What's the most thing you've taken out of that, coming from such a far, you went to Texas, now you're back in Michigan?
It's interesting because at Ball High we had 1/3 of our students were African American, 1/3 were Hispanic, and 1/3 were white. We had all socioeconomic levels, all educational levels from parents. Just a very different school system, very different place. But what I took from it more than anything else is, when I'm dealing with students there or I'm dealing with students here, they're all pretty much the same. Kids are kids. The issues that high school kids were having at Ball High 24 years ago when I started, and the issues that high school students are having today at Spring Lake, not to get altogether different. It's all about growing up, finding your way, finding your voice, knowing how to live with purpose and how to be successful on your terms, and also how to work with others and work with their terms. So, the same issues then, the same issues now.
what are the advantages, and I suppose if there's a disadvantage to that technology coming in?
And then and now, relationships are still the most important thing, because if we don't connect with our students and connect as staff members to one another, I think the business of education, whether it's working with students or working with colleagues, it's not rewarding. Even with technology, we still value our people more than we do.
From where I sit, that change of the teacher providing the information, which it had to be, one, right? It had to be the teacher had to provide the information, because, I mean, I guess we would get it from books, of course, but, you know, that source is limited. Now we have an unlimited supply and source of information. So now the drive is, well, how do we decipher what's good or what's bad, and then how do we use that? To me, that's an exciting, you know, I like that change.
And it's the world, at least, you're going to face when you graduate from college and you go out into the work world. I mean, it would be great, and I think our schools are continuing to evolve toward emulating what that work world will look like, because that work world is so different than when I came into the workforce. And, you know, it's much more about your talent, your drive, your emotional intelligence, your ability to process information and solve problems creatively. Those are the talents, those are the skills that are going to get you good jobs. We've got a little bit of a social media push we're going to put on here shortly, and as a district, and I hope as we do that, we do it right. You know, I mean, that's the whole thing. I think students sometimes laugh at the way adults use social media, and I get it, I understand. But, you know, we're trying to figure that out.
So, do you mind using the Share Chair podcast as a way to, like, can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what do you?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit.
Little
So
something.
here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go probably once every week and a half to 2 weeks over the course of, you know, however long that takes for the school year. I'm going to visit a grade level, and I'm going to spend a full day with a kindergarten teacher, and then a first grade teacher, and I'm going to go all the way through high school. So it'll take me 13 different days, and what I want to do with each one of those days is integrate 3 different types of social media. So I will tweet from the classroom. I will have pictures and posts on Instagram from the classroom, including some videos. And then for my parents who are more into Facebook, we will have some Facebook posts.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking about using that as an opportunity to launch a blog that I can write a little bit about the experience. And what we're going to be looking for with that and aiming at with that is, you know, probably I would say it's a 60-40 split. 40% of it is about what it's like to be a student in that grade level or in that content area, but really the rest of it, the majority of it is what's it mean to be a public school educator, a teacher who teaches kindergarten. And I've got a number of ideas that I'm going to explore with that, because what I really want our parents and our students and our community to recognize is the complexity of being a teacher, and the demands of that job.
This is kind of a completely random question, and I guess it's for both of you, but you educators and my parents, I guess, and just older people, not old, but older than me in general, are always talking about how, like you just said, we might scoff at the way you use social media and everything, which, yeah, I do. But what did you scoff at your parents about? I have no idea. Like, was there any sort of thing that they didn't know how to do either, and then you did? I think that teenagers will be interested in hearing that, because we go through it often.
Everything, right? I mean,
That's right.
it's
That's
funny.
what I was gonna say,
My
too.
daughter, Lainey went to the Ariana Grande concert last night, and she went with a couple of moms. And, you know, I was joking with the moms beforehand that their daughters are all 10 and 11. I said, you know, this is really pushing the limit in terms of when you can actually go to a concert with your child and dance and sing. And it's true, though. I mean, you know, so, you know, when I was a kid, we made fun of our parents for the music they listened to, how they danced, you know, socially what they were interested in. But I think things were much, there were fewer options then, right, Dave? I mean,
Yeah, so
the number of options parents have today versus what they had then, very different.
Yeah, I'd say so. For me, it was always about technology, just in like, mom and dad, all of my friends have CD players now. Like, everybody does. But we still had the tapes, you know,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
still, so it's like, people have had Nintendo for 2 years now, mom and dad. Like, you gotta get me one. I gotta stay up to date with the Nintendo. And so, yeah, that's kind of, I don't know. So it was always like, my mom and dad, they don't get technology. Like, they don't get how necessary this video game system is, or
But
whatever.
we grew up with vinyl,
Yeah,
and then we had
cassettes.
well,
the 8-tracks.
8-tracks.
Yeah, 8-tracks.
We had cassettes. Then we had CDs. I mean, the big thing when I was in junior high and into high school was to have a Walkman.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they were just the coolest thing. And if you could get the Walkman that could go underwater and be submerged, it was even better.
Dennis, you mentioned one thing we wanted to ask you about was more like your family. You know, got to know you. So you grew up near Lansing.
Grew up in Ionia, Michigan.
In Ionia.
Ionia, Michigan, home of the Bulldogs. You know, Ionia was when I grew up, it was a GM town, more or less. A lot of parents worked in Lansing at Oldsmobile. Increasingly became more of a prison town because they built prisons in Ionia. But it was a nice place to grow up. Good town then. Went to Michigan State. Met my wife Jody there when I was a senior and she was a junior. And then after I graduated, I went to Texas to teach. And a year later, Jody moved down to Texas to teach as well. And we were there for 6 years total, and then we moved back to Michigan and she taught in Onekama, and I was a principal there. Then I went to Glen Lake, and we had our first son, Charlie, who is going to be 13 in November. And then a few years later, we had Lainey, and Lainey just turned 10. So, and now Jody teaches in Grand Haven, kindergarten, and Charlie's a 7th grader, and Lainey is a 4th grader at Jeffers.
Do you have siblings?
I have an older sister who's 2 years older and a younger sister who's 6 years younger, yeah.
And what are they up to?
My younger sister, Robin, is a special ed teacher in Oxford, Michigan. And my older sister, Michelle, works for Old Navy Gap as the Director of Human Resources for the Midwest. Neither of my parents graduated from high school. So, you know, for us it was a big deal. I mean, and that was generational as well, I think, with a lot of folks. I mean, they grew up in rural areas and in very different situations, but neither of them had the opportunity to complete high school due to situations in their lives. Never did. And my dad, who's been deceased now for 13 years or 14, he was still a well-educated man, but he just never had the benefit of a high school diploma. And my mom might have had a very successful career at General Motors, and my mom's had a 30-plus year career selling real estate and doing very well.
I remember you said just now that when you were teaching back 20 years ago, you said the same problems that teenagers in high school have now. Do you have any remembering from when you were in high school the same problems that we have now, or do you have any fun things that you did?
Well, I mean, it's funny because I think you go back to, when I was in high school and dress code was always an issue. When I grew up, there was the same things with drinking and drug use that I think kids experience today. There were some of those challenges, I guess, behaviorally that we still have and I think always will have because young kids are going to experiment with things. I just don't think it's changed as much as people. I think the things around childhood and adolescence have changed, but I think childhood and adolescence are pretty much the same. We're still just developmentally at a stage where we're learning things. And
and one of the things you said that we learn at this age, at the high school age, is finding our own voice. And is there a moment or a person who helped you? When would you say you found that? And maybe it's an evolutionary thing and you're still finding it, but was there a moment or a person in your life who helped find your voice?
Yeah, probably. I can't just name one. I'd name three. My high school English teacher, Bonita McFarland in Ionia. Senior English, I was a great English student, did very, very well, blew off a project at the midpoint of my senior year, and she gave me the grade I earned. Ended up with a D- for the semester, which ruined my chances of going to Michigan State, which was where I wanted to be. So I ended up going to Western Michigan for a year, which was a great experience. And I loved Kalamazoo and I loved Western, so that wasn't a problem. But I had to wait a year to get to Michigan State. And then when I went into teaching, my mentor teacher, Leah Ray Marchand, to this day, one of the strongest, most motivated, and really one of the best educators I've ever known. She really took me under her wing because I was there in Galveston alone and without any friends or family at the time, and so she kind of made me part of her family, and she influenced me because teaching is hard work, and she made it work for me. And then my first principal, Mary Shimkus, was the same. So,
in kind of branching off that question, I see every day being a student in high school how high schoolers and teenagers in general rely on books and music and movies and everything. Like someone has that, or athletics, you have that thing that you love. I love books. But in high school, did you like English, obviously?
Yeah, I love to read and I love music. So, it's funny. So Yeah, I grew up in the age of when hip hop and rap were becoming popular. So, yes, for a funny thing, I mean, I grew up as a huge Public Enemy, NWA, Wu-Tang Clan. I mean, we were really into that when I was growing up. I was never much of a reader until I got to be in about junior high, and then it's the way it works for you. You read a book, and all of a sudden you're completely hooked on reading. And for me, this sounds strange because I was in junior high, but it was The Godfather. It was The Godfather, which not very literary. Right? Mario Puzo novel, great movie. I hadn't seen the movie at that point in time, but I read the book, flew through it, and all of a sudden I couldn't read enough books fast enough.
So here we are in a great spot, I think, for Spring Lake schools in regards to resources. We're now K-12 technology. We're building 2 almost new elementary schools, huge changes at the middle school, intermediate. It's an incredible time in that regard. So part of me wouldn't blame you if you weren't thinking about 10 more years down the road, but that's what I'm curious about. What's the next, when this is done, what's the next thing? What are schools hungry for? Or what are you hungry for Spring Lake schools?
Ooh, Dave, that's a hard question. Let me answer it a couple of different ways. First and foremost, a lot of what we're doing today was part of a plan we made 4 or 5 years ago, and we're just reaching the tail end of that. I love ideas. I think like a lot of people who work in education, I love to talk about exciting opportunities and ideas, but I want to be very cautious to say, I think the best ideas for our future strategic plan, I know my fingerprints are going to be on it because I plan to work on that, but I think it's going to come from staff. It's going to come from parents, community, students. I think the process will drive what it looks like. It could be more of a STEM focus. It could be continuing to push foreign language lower into the grade levels. I think what I always wonder about is why we continue to have this manufacturing mentality in education, that students have to have 5 periods per day and 3 trimesters per year, and we're so schedule bound and time bound, and why we're not more focused on learning as the driver. And when I say that, our teachers and our students are great at learning, there's no question. But I wonder why a model that was created 100 years ago or 200 years ago by Catholic schools in this country hasn't shifted to be more, more modern. No answers to it. I just have a dream that school won't be 5 periods. My son's in middle school, so it's 6 periods a day every day, get up the next day, repeat.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that's the only way to do it, but maybe there's a different way. I think kids all need a rich, social science education. They do. They need the math, the science, the social studies, the English. They need the foreign language. They need the arts. They need all that. But do we have to deliver it in such discrete buckets on an assembly line? Or could we kind of blow that up and make it look a little bit differently where, Elise McGannon needs something different than that?
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
It was my pleasure. This was fun.
Thanks, Dennis.
We can do this every Wednesday about this time.
Yeah, we'll have another series of questions, but thanks. That was great.
Yeah, thank you.
That was great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Share Chair. Stay tuned next week while we discuss LGBTQ awareness with one of Spring Lake High School's own students.